Auditor rotation is not a HUD or REAC requirement. However, the REAC Audit Acquisition Manual, which doesn't exist, by the way, says that an audit rotation for a fresh set of eyes periodically can be desirable. Firms with large audit staff can rotate staff assigned, including partner level. The staff rotation and firm rotation satisfy the rotation theory. Well, there is no rotation theory in the United States, period. That's baloney. That's hogwash. I don't know where that came from.
Comes from the field office.
Okay. Yeah. The answer is there is absolutely no requirement for auditor rotation anywhere in U.S. auditing standards, in Yellow Book.
Not in standards, not in HUD requirements, nowhere else.
Nowhere else.
Every now and then, I think, but the Ohio State Auditor will select auditors and they will force rotations at the state requirement.
Okay.
Bobby says Alabama, at least field office is forcing it. But we don't know where they get that from at all. They suggest it strongly.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, well, that's never. Go ahead, sir.
I don't want to practice law here, but I think you can take them to restrain a trade. I think you can take that state agency to court on restrain a trade.
Let me ask you this. If you get those, here's what I would do. The best single approach is to do this. Have the client respond back to PIH. Okay? And I send it to Nick. I would send it to Nick. I'm going to Nick, come on, this doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Now, in multifamily, when we've done that, they've actually worked backwards through the program office to sort of eliminate those issues, kind of, help the staff down below fix that. How far public housing is willing to go, I don't know. Multifamily, we don't have the same. We hear from time to time, but it's not the same. Sir, go ahead.
I thought they put it out in the draft, like 2003 edition.
The field office implied. Do you have formal documentation of that? Do you have a letter or anything?
No letter.
No, I understand, but did they say we strongly encourage you to have auditor rotation? Send me a copy.
The other point I'd like to make about auditor rotation is that under the new clarity standards, there is an enhanced level of required understanding by the auditors of the entity and its internal control than under previous standards. Auditor rotation basically undermines that process, that if you're going to change auditors every 3 or 5 years, it takes that long for auditors to figure out everything that's going on and understand the environment and the controls, and now you're going to throw that out and start over again. So, I think that from the perspective of the clarity standards, auditor rotation doesn't stand a chance of making any sense that you would want to do that.
So here's what I will do. You give me those, if you can send me whatever the documentation they gave you back that says strongly suggest, I will write from AHACPA to HUD on a letter saying, and I will include those comments from Marlo, that we'll address that directly with them. Well, of course they are. But that's why we have to address it at a higher level so that it stops. Okay? It's in writing. Anything else here? Oh, yeah, okay.
Boards ask the question all the time because they think it's their job to ask the question, how long for audit? If they don't understand.
Have you ever been to that, to their accounting briefs or notices about the one accounting, what's the, not brief, but number 6, how to hire an auditor? The gap flyer, sorry. Gap flyer 6. And I send people that all the time. How that started was an email from practitioners in to say, does this make a lot of sense? And we're going to come up, maybe we'll write the letter a little different, saying auditor rotation, is this something you really should be forcing? We'll write it in a way like that to say, before you jump into this, consider these other things that you don't really know about. Furthermore, auditors are really forced to go through a process now on independence where one of the risks to independence is what? Familiarity. So if we're addressing that risk And management understands that. Why force rotation on another process that just basically sends you back to the drawing board every 2 to 3 years?
And Les, wouldn't you agree? I mean, the issue is the auditor doing what's required
The issue
of
is
the auditor
always
to
is
do?
the auditor doing.
And if they're not, then of course that's always an issue with regard to whether you keep that audit firm or not. But I mean, if they're doing a good job, just because they're there all the time, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I see where HUD's going. I see where their thought process is, but it doesn't mean that there's anything behind it.
One thing I will say, disagreeing to a little bit here, you got to follow your procurement policy. And so you've got to look at those as far as contracts, how far they can extend out contracts. And then by rule, the agency is required to what? Go out and bid. That is different completely from rotating, but we can't just say, this is what it's going to be for 10 years.
How do you feel about bidding when the client's perfectly happy with their own auditor and they're asking you to bid or to bid? It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your time.
Okay, now let me also add one more thing to the mix, because you can change policy, right? Policies can be changed. But one of the things Ray read from the document the other day about the super circular. The other thing the super circular covers very closely is auditor selection and how to bid for, how to go through auditor selection process. Nowhere in there, in that whole new super circular, is there any mention of saying I have to have one thing or the other or all this. It's an open source principled kind of a view of how to do this. And I already have stuff on that too, by the way. Just, you know, really A133 is out a ways, and there are some, I think if you go back to the slides from yesterday that I didn't cover, the one thing I was going to tell you actually is I actually went through subsection F and laid out each of the different rules. Most of them aren't that particularly necessary now because they're coming up in the future, and there aren't a lot of changes. But I might have left that procurement in there. I cannot remember right now, but if not, go back and get the super circular off our website. Down in subchapter F, F, we actually cover in A1, what used to be A133, the audit side. They talk about auditor selection. None of that's in there. Most of the things we've described today in terms of what HUD requires are not in that. So there's no new rules for even A133 that force you into a certain process.